happen all this time. So we just love this guy. Thanks for being here. God bless you.
Yeah, you guys have made this happen. This is a fabulous church. We've had a great weekend with you guys, and our team stepped up, but we could only step up because you guys are here to invite us in and to provide your team to make it happen. We had about 1,000 students here yesterday. It was magnificent. So thank you for your part. Let's hear it for you guys, the part that you got to play. You know, I actually get to do a lot of these kinds of conferences, not always focusing on youth. We have 6 of these conferences focusing on youth here around the country. You know, we just tried to box the compass, and we were really working hard to get into the Northeast, but Philly was as far north as we could get and still find Christians. So, you know, we're thrilled to be able to partner with you guys here. And part of the difficulty of doing these kind of conferences, though, is there's so much information. You get Friday night, all day Saturday, and just overwhelmed, and you feel like that guy in the Far Side cartoon. You know, he's in the math class, and the formulas are on the border, and he raises his hand, and he says, "Professor, could I please be excused? My brain is full." You know, you just get overwhelmed with all of this information. And I've noticed that there's a problem oftentimes with these good conferences, and the problem is that there's a missing bridge. A bridge from the content to the conversation, or a bridge from the scholarship to the relationship kind of thing. And oftentimes when I'm invited to speak at a session in a conference, I'm going to provide the bridge, and that's what I want to do for you today. So whatever it is that you know about Christianity, it may be a little, it may be a lot, I understand that it's not always easy in our culture to get into play in conversations with people. In fact, it's getting more and more difficult. So I'm going to say a couple of things here before I get into the tactical material proper that is meant to set a stage to invite you to think about evangelism in our culture in maybe a different way than you've thought about it before. Now, what I'm going to say is going to be a little controversial for some people. I get this. I get pushback on it. That's fine. But I want you to consider what I have to say and see if you find it helpful, then you can make application in your own life to this. But I will say this as the kind of first thing to kind of get you thinking. When I get in a conversation with somebody that I hope will have a spiritual impact in their lives, maybe I meet them on an airplane and I'm talking to them, or wherever it happens, waitress in a restaurant, I mean, wherever it happens to be, I never have it as a goal to lead that person to Christ. In fact, I don't even have it as a goal in that conversation necessarily to even get to the gospel. Now, do I want them to come to Christ? Of course I do. Is the gospel necessary? Absolutely. It's the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes. Okay? What I'm getting at, though, is a response to the way our culture has developed. Okay? A lot of times people will say, well, if you're in a conversation with somebody, just get right to if you have a short amount of time, get right to the simple gospel. Okay? Here's one of the problems with that approach nowadays. The gospel is no longer simple to people. I became a Christian almost 49 years ago, 1973 in September. I was a student at UCLA. And back then, half a century ago, people understood Christianity. It was part of our cultural understanding, even though everybody wasn't a Christian. And there were people who didn't believe in God even. For the most part, people had an understanding of the concepts. So when you talked about Jesus and the cross and all of those kinds of things, these were concepts that found a home in the minds of the people you're talking with. All right? Nowadays, that's not the same. It's different. People don't hear, well, what they hear is they hear religious noise a lot of times. They don't understand these concepts. They don't understand these words. I told somebody once Jesus died for him, and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that." Did he get better? You know, one of those kinds of things. And so the gospel is not simple in people's minds. In fact, nowadays, when you preach the simple gospel, it sounds like hate speech to some people. This is arrogant, put down on other people who don't believe the way we believe. That's the way it comes across to them. I'm not saying that Christians are always like that in the way they display, but I'm saying this is the way the message is heard. So that's one problem. Here's another problem. There are so many challenges to Christianity that people have right now that are in the way of them even considering the message. We've got all the classical challenges that were around 50 years ago, but now we got all kinds of new things just in the last 5 or 10 years. All the sexual stuff, all the gender stuff, all the dysphoria, and all that other stuff that's going on. And these are huge issues that seem in people's minds to inveigh against Christianity. And so unless some of those things are kind of addressed, for a lot of people, they're not even interested in thinking about Christianity. So that's a second barrier. They don't understand the terminology we use. Secondly, they have all these questions. They think the smart people have weighed in and found Christianity wanting. And so they're not interested. They're apathetic. All right? Here's the third thing. If I told you I was going to give you a game plan that was going to help you to get more people to sign on the dotted line, pray that prayer and come into the kingdom, accept Christ, well, you'd take notes and you'd listen to what I had to say, and you may say, praise the Lord, hallelujah, whatever, and then you wouldn't do it. And the reason you wouldn't do it is because the idea of trying to get an individual to the point where they are going to make a decision for Christ, that feels awkward to Christians. And especially in the context of our culture, them's almost fighting words, with people. And so consequently, you're not going to engage, you're going to stay on the bench. And by the way, I understand that entirely. I'm totally sympathetic to that. I realize I understand that. And this is why for many years now, I've been in a process of transitioning to a different way of looking at this entire project. I want you to think, for example, and this goes back to the point I made a few moments ago about something that Jesus said in his parable about the sower, okay? Remember that parable? He's talking about 4 different types of soil and then 4 different types of responses. I've read that parable a lot of times, but about 2 or 3 years ago, I read it again, and I saw something I had never seen before. And it just jumped out at me. In Matthew 13, one version of this parable, Jesus is talking about the first type of soil. That's the hard, the road, where the seed just lands and it never takes root, and the birds take it away, right? And so we think, oh yeah, that's the hard soil. That's the people with really hard hearts, and they don't even want to listen. And there are a lot of people like that. But Jesus said a little bit more about that. Here's what he said, Matthew 13, verse 19. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it. When anybody hears the word and does not understand it, that's the phrase I hadn't seen before. Here's the place where Jesus is explaining the parable to his disciples, and he's saying on that first type of ground, people hear the word and they don't get it. They don't understand it. It doesn't make sense to them. And the evil one comes and snatches away what has been sown in their heart. Jesus' words. It isn't just bouncing off of them. It gets in. They can't figure it out. They don't make sense of it. Then he goes to the other 2 soils, and he goes to the final soil, and he says, verse 23, and the one on whom seed was sown in the good soil, this is the man who hears and understands, and then bears fruit 160, 30-fold. Okay, so, boy, I never realized that a big part of what's going on here in the response of the soils has to do with the understanding. And if we are not communicating in a way that people understand, then this is the kind of result that we're going to get. We're going to get the devil. They're easy pickings for the devil. Let me put it that way. Now, I said a few moments ago something that might have surprised you. And that is that I don't have it as a goal to lead anybody to Christ in a conversation. And that seems a little bit weird. Well, fasten your seatbelts, because I got another confession to make. And that is, I have not prayed with anyone to receive Christ in over 30 years. I know what you're thinking. What a loser, kind of thing. But I will tell you this. I have never been more effective for the gospel than I have been in the last 30 years. And that's because of a change of perspective that I have that I think is actually more consistent with Scripture than my approach in the past, okay? I'm just going to do an aside here and make an observation. There is no place in the book of Acts where anyone prays to receive Christ or is prayed with to receive Christ. Nobody's challenged to do that. There are no altar calls in the book of Acts. None, all right? These are cultural forms that we've adopted for certain purposes. Actually, it's only about 150 or 200 years old in terms of cultural practice. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them, okay? And I've done them and we use them and these are effective, but they're not obligatory, is the point I'm making. They're not obligatory. What we see going on in the New Testament, particularly book of Acts, is something different, all right? And here I want to offer an insight that has totally changed my approach. I'm going to give you a little, like a one-line saying. It's called an aphorism. It's a kind of a catchy little memorable thing. Jesus taught in aphorisms. He didn't preach in three-point sermons with all the points starting with the same letter. That wasn't his style. The first shall be last and the last shall be first. That's an aphorism. Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar, and unto God the things that are God. So I want to offer one to you. If you're taking notes, I want you to write this down because this is really important. It's very simple, and it's very obvious. It's a truism that is not even profound when you think about it, but it can have a profound impact on the way you do evangelism when you understand its application. And here it is. Before there can be any harvest, any harvest, there always has to be a season. Let's just call it gardening, all right? Before there can be a harvest, there's got to be a season of gardening. And you're thinking, no duh, right? Some of you got a nice day out here. It's a springtime, and you're thinking, maybe I'll start to hoe in the garden and turn some soil and get my own garden going for the summer. It's a process. You have to do these particular things until way down the line, sometimes there's a harvest that comes in for your efforts, all right? Before there can be any harvest, there always has to be a season of gardening. Now, this concept is built into a little encounter that Jesus had in John chapter 4. And I want you to just think about this. Many of you are familiar with Jesus' encounter with the woman at the well. And that's what a lot of sermons about John 4 are about. It's a great encounter, a lot to be learned there. But I want you to think about what happened after that encounter when Jesus is talking to his disciples. She's off to Sychar. This is Samaria. He talks to the woman. She goes to Sychar, the little village there where the well is at. And he tells his disciples, you say there are 4 months and then comes the harvest? I say to you, look on the fields, that they are white with harvest. Now, I don't think Jesus was saying that every field is always white with harvest. I think he was saying Sychar was white with harvest. And in fact, they did have a harvest. And he tells his disciples, you are about to reap where you did not sow. Now, think of the phrase now. You are about to reap where you did not sow. You're about to harvest where you did not garden. So implicit in that statement are a couple of things I want you to catch. First of all, Jesus is making a reference to a field, in this case Sychar, one field, okay? But in this field there are 2 seasons. There is a sowing season and a reaping season. There is a gardening season and a harvesting season, okay? And there are also 2 kinds of workers. There are sowers and there are reapers. There are gardeners and there are harvesters. And Jesus is saying, you guys are going to be able to, somebody else did the heavy lifting, you're going to be able to get the easy pickings. You're going to get the low-hanging fruit. You got the easy job. The harvest is easy when the gardening is done properly, is another principle tied to this. I want to tell you something about gardening. I should say more about harvesting because I just made the comment, the harvesting is easy when the gardening is done. I became a Christian in 1978, and my brother Mark was the one who was doing most of the gardening in my life. He was my younger brother. Actually, we had 5 kids in our family. Mark was the middle, and he led everybody else to Christ of the kids. And so, I mean, if you have concerns about your own family and you're wondering, yeah, God can do anything, all right? And I was his older brother. And in any event, he had talked to me for years about Christ. But on that night that he came to visit me in my apartment in West L.A., September 28th, 1973, he started to share Christ with me more. And I told him, Mark, you don't have to tell me anything more about Jesus. I've already decided I want to become a Christian. Now, it took me about 5 minutes to peel him off the ceiling. And then I gave my life to Christ. I began to follow Christ. All right? Now, here's what I want you to see. I was ripe. The harvest was ready. All he had to do was bump into the fruit, and it fell into the basket. Harvesting happens almost automatically. You read Acts chapter 10. There's Cornelius. Peter comes in to preach to Cornelius. He's preaching the message. He doesn't give an altar call. He doesn't ask anybody to receive Christ. They hear the message. By the power of the Spirit, they understand it, and they believe it, and they start speaking in tongues and prophesying. And Peter's going, man, they've received the Holy Spirit just like we did. Let's baptize them. All right? And we see this over and over and over again. The communication of the truth in a clear fashion so that people understand it, and then God does the work of conversion in the process. All right? So I want to, the harvest then is easy when the fruit is ripe. Now, I told you a few moments ago that I haven't prayed with somebody to receive Christ in over 30 years, so I want to tell you something else. I don't know if any of you have heard of a guy named J. Warner Wallace. If you're here in the conference, you heard him speak yesterday, closing session. He also did workshops. 2 of his books are out on the table right over here. J. Warner Wallace is a storied Torrance PD in LA County, cold case detective. Jim was such an effective detective, he never lost a single case that went to trial. And these are cold case murders. In other words, for 15 or 20 years, nobody's been able to solve them. These are, all the files are in boxes collecting dust in the back room there, and he gets them out and he finds a bad guy and he puts him away, okay? In fact, he is so good that he had 4 of his trials, 4 of them on Dateline. He was famous on Dateline. They called him the evidence whisperer. But one thing you don't know about J. Warner Wallace is Jim was not a Christian. He was an atheist, and a hardcore atheist at that. But he decided, under challenge from others, that to take his significant skills as a detective and apply those skills to the testimony of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John to see if these ancient eyewitness testimonies were reliable or not. When he did that, he found they were. He became a Christian, and then he became a Christian apologist, and then a best-selling Christian author who wrote a book called Cold Case Christianity. It's right out there. What you don't know is that J. Warner Wallace, when he was an atheist, was in my garden. Jim was listening to our radio show when he was an atheist. You might have heard of a guy named Abdu Murray. He's a Muslim, former Muslim from Detroit, who became a follower of Jesus and then became an apologist and then started writing books. He's got his own organization. You might have read his book, Saving Truth, for example, most recently. Abdu Murray was in my garden. Abdu Murray, as a Muslim, was listening to our show. One of the guys that was on the stage yesterday, Jonathan Noyes, he was an atheist in my garden. And then God worked through Stand to Reason and through others, and he eventually became a Christian, and now he's on our team. All right. Do you realize what happened? Somebody went into my garden and they harvested my crop. Get out of my garden. Is that my attitude? That's not my attitude. I'm thrilled because we're all on the same team. We may be doing different jobs, but we're all on the same team. And that's why Jesus said right in that passage, so that the one who reaps and the one who sows can rejoice together. So the one who reaps and the one who sows can rejoice together. So I realized a while back that I was actually a gardener. I wasn't a harvester. Now, my suspicion is that most Christians are not harvesters. Most are gardeners. They don't realize it. Because we've inherited a harvesting tool in evangelism that for a lot of us is not very comfortable. And so we don't use it. We sit on the bench. We're out of play. But if you don't have good gardeners, you're not going to have a good harvest, right? Now, you might be thinking, well, how would I know whether I'm a harvester or a gardener? And it's actually kind of simple, okay? If you've listened to what I've said so far, and you're a little bit bugged. What? You don't get to the gospel? You don't want people saved? You got to give them the gospel. You got to ask them if they want to receive Christ. Challenge people. If that's your attitude, good. I'm glad for you. You're a harvester. That's why you're bugged. But I know there's a whole bunch of you out there going, oh, man, I never heard this before. Oh, wow. That sounds, John, oh, yeah, this sounds good. You're starting to feel relaxed. You're starting to think, well, maybe there's a place for me here. I suspect that's most of you, because most of you are gardeners, okay? Now, you might be thinking a couple of things. When do I get to the gospel in my method, my approach? And my response is, I get to the gospel whenever I want. Now, it may sound a little cheeky, but the point I'm making is I communicate the gospel when I think it's appropriate in the flow of the conversation I'm in. When would it not be appropriate? Well, did you ever notice that Jesus didn't always get to the gospel? He got to a lot of bad news. You ever read the Sermon on the Mount? Oh, that's great moral teaching. Yeah, great moral teaching? Yeah, but it ain't good news. Do not murder. The law says don't murder. Oh, I haven't murdered anybody. Good. Did you call your brother an idiot? Yeah, you're going to hell. That's Jesus. Do not commit adultery. Man, I'm clean there. Really? Have you ever thought about it? I'm a guy, right? Yeah, you're going to hell. That's not good news. This is all bad news. You are to be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. That's not good news. That your righteousness exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, this is not good news. This is bad news. And it's only when the bad news settles upon us and we realize how lost we are that we hear the words of Jesus, come unto me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Rest from what? All that toil and labor that that's not going to get you into heaven anyway. Only by grace. The grace that God provides through Jesus. Okay, that's how that all fits in. So Jesus didn't always get to the gospel. He gave what he needed at the point of time as he saw fit. And this is my approach as well. Now, I also have another goal. I mentioned my goal is not to win them to Christ or get them to sign on the dotted line. I have a different kind of goal. And when I speak at university, this is the way I start my presentation. I say, I'm here tonight because my life has been deeply changed by an ancient teacher. His name is Jesus of Nazareth. And when I was a student at UCLA, almost 50 years ago, I began to think about the claims that Jesus made about himself, the claims he made about reality, and the claim that he made on my own life. I asked a lot of questions, I pushed back a lot, I argued a lot, but I finally came to the conclusion that Jesus got it right. So this is what I'm telling the audience. And so I decided the smart money's on Jesus, I'm going to follow him. And then I tell them it hasn't been easy. It's been hard, actually, but it's been reality. And then I offer this. I say, I'm not here tonight, though, to convert you. Collective sigh of relief. Then I say, but I do want to annoy you a little bit. I want to annoy you in a good way. Here's what I want to do. I want to put a stone in your shoe. I want to put a stone in your shoe. I just want you to think of that concept, okay? You get a stone in your shoe, right? This is not the end of the world, but it's no fun either. It just kind of gets at you. It gets at you. It gets at you till you have to deal with it. And this is what I tell the audience. I want you walking out of here with something that I've said that's getting at you. I want you thinking about Jesus of Nazareth because I think Jesus is worth thinking about. Then I go on with my talk, a lecture, whatever it happens to be. Put a stone in their shoe. So if I sit down with somebody next to me on the airplane, get in a conversation, what am I looking to do? Lead that person to Christ? No. Look, real conversions don't happen like that. I'm just going to try to move that person a little bit further forward if I'm able to put a stone in their shoe, as I put it. And if I'm able, I'm just one player on the team. And God's the one who's ultimately in charge. So if I can just get them thinking about something, I'm a happy camper. Now, if I can put more than one stone, all right, depends on how the conversation goes. But if you have the expectation that in order to engage productively, you have to push towards the close to get them signed on the dotted line, that's where you're going to stay on the bench. But if you have a lower expectation of your conversations, maybe I can do a little here, a little there, a little weed pulling, a little soil turning, a little bit of watering, whatever. Well, I could do that. You could do that. What you don't have at this point, though, is a good tool to garden. And that's what I want to give you next. I'm going to make a promise here. I've got about half, oh no, I don't, 25, 50. I got 5 minutes left. Actually, longer than that, but my flight doesn't leave till 4, so I'm okay. In the next 15 or 20 minutes, I'm going to give you a game plan that will allow you to converse with confidence in any situation, no matter how little you know, or how knowledgeable, or aggressive, or even obnoxious the other person happens to be, okay? It's a game plan that follows something I see in Colossians chapter 4, verse 5 and 6, all right? Make a note of that, but I'll tell you what it says. In Colossians 4, verse 5 and 6, Paul says, conduct yourself with wisdom towards outsiders, okay? Making the most of the opportunity, okay? So in other words, he starts by saying, be smart. Then he says, let your speech always be with grace, seasoned as it were with salt. So he says, be smart. Now he says, be nice. All right? What a concept. Then he says, so that you know how to respond to each person. So he says, be smart, be nice, but be tactical. Treat people as individuals because they are individuals. Every circumstance is unique. So I'm going to introduce you to a tactical game plan that treats people and circumstances as individuals. Now, let me give you an illustration of what I'm talking about. I grew up in Chicago. We have some property that my grandpa left to us in northern Wisconsin. It's a little place on a nice little lake, and I've been going up there since I was a kid. It's all fallen to me now, and I still go up there and I like to fish. So I'm a bass fisherman when I get to fish, and especially in the North Country, I like to fish for smallmouth bass. You've got some streams around Pennsylvania. It's got a lot of really good smallmouth fishing. But most of the smallmouth in the streams are not like that big. I like bigger fish. And this day out with a local pastor, I caught the largest smallmouth bass of my life, and at that time it was 4 pounds, 2 ounces. Now that's a pretty big smallie, for that neck of the woods. A big smallie for Pennsylvania too. But he got a snap of that picture, and I was really proud of that fish. But just so you know, I actually have 8 fish over 5 pounds since then. I'm just saying, and. And one was 513, and that sucker would have eaten one more crawdad before he bit my bait. I would have had my 6-pounder. But in any event, I was really proud of that fish, and so I wanted to get that digitized. It showed up on the screen at the church where I was going to be, his church, where I was going to be speaking the following weekend. And so my wife and I took the film, F-I-L, okay, to get developed. And there was a young lady that was at the kiosk there processing the order. She had a large pentagram hanging from her neck, jewelry, 5-pointed star. Now, that's often an occultic symbol, and I noticed it looked like a statement to me, so I asked her, I said, does that jewelry have religious significance? And she said, yeah, it does. The 5 points stand for earth, wind, fire, water, and spirit. Okay, I got it. Bells are going off in my head. But then I said, I'm just curious, does it have religious significance for you personally, or is it just like jewelry? Because a lot of people wear a cross and it doesn't mean anything. It's just jewelry to them. No, it does have religious significance to me. She said, I'm a pagan. Okay, now, so I'm a trained professional, right? I'm just taking all this in, but my wife is standing next to me. And when she hears this gal refer to herself as a pagan, my wife breaks into laughter. Then she catches herself. She says, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be rude, but I never heard anybody admit it before. That kind of thing. She only heard the word pagan when her girlfriends would call their kids, get in here, a bunch of pagans, that kind of thing. So the gal wasn't offended. She went on to explain her view a little bit, and I realized I was talking to a witch. And so I just asked her, are you Wiccan? And she said, yes, I am. And then she says, we respect all life, okay? I thought, oh, that's good. And I happen to know that, too. And I said, you must be pro-life then with regards to the abortion question. She says, no, I'm pro-choice. Really? Isn't it odd for a witch to be pro-choice? And she said, it's a little odd, yes, but then she said this. She said, here's her words. She said, I know I could never do that, referring to abortion. I could never kill a baby. I could never do that. I could never kill a baby. Now, after Megan's presentation tonight, and by the way, you've got to come and hear Megan. She is a first-rate communicator, and she will hold your attention the whole time. And this is a very, very important issue, okay? But the case that we make is that abortion does take an innocent human life without proper justification. So murder, if you will, but we don't use that language Baby killing, we don't say that kind of stuff because we don't want people to think we're making our case using loaded rhetoric. If you got a good case, you don't need rhetoric. You make the case, all right? But in this conversation, I wasn't the one calling abortion baby killing. It was the person who believed abortion was okay who was acknowledging that abortion was killing a baby. Because I'm paying attention to the conversation, am I going to talk about abortion anymore? Abortion? No. I'm going to talk about what? Baby killing. Her words, not mine. She said, I know I could never do that. I could never kill a baby. And then she gave the reason why. She said, I wouldn't want something bad to come back on me. Now, this seems odd to me. Like maybe a karma thing, what goes around comes around. It's like, I'm not going to kill any baby. You never know what's going to happen to you when you start killing. Really? That's your reason? I didn't pursue that, though. I just simply said, well, if you won't kill babies, good, but maybe we should stop other people from killing babies. And she said, well, I think people should have a choice. Now, what's the choice we're talking about? The choice to kill babies. And that's what you mean people should have a choice to kill babies? She said, well, I think everything should be taken into consideration. I said, okay, what would be a legitimate consideration to make it okay to kill a baby? And she immediately said incest, all right? So I want you to notice what she's doing here. She's basically trotting out all the pro-choice slogans, but she has already characterized abortion as baby killing, so all of the slogans for abortion are now slogans in favor of baby killing, and it's starting to sound a little weird. But she doesn't realize it because she's not paying attention. She's repeating slogans. Now, you're going to encounter this all the time with all kinds of people with challenges against Christianity, and what they're doing is repeating things they've heard other people say, but they haven't really thought very thoroughly about the issue. By the way, it's true on the other side of the aisle, too. Christians do this all the time as well, all right? Sloganeering is not conversation. It's not communication. It doesn't abet understanding. Okay, so I said to her, let me ask you a question. If I had a 2-year-old that was standing next to me here that had been conceived by incest, on your view, I should be allowed to kill this 2-year-old. Now, we call this trotting out the toddler. I'm not sure if Megan will talk about it tonight. She did in the conference, but it's a little technique. The reason for abortion, is it okay to apply that to the toddler? And she had already called abortion baby killing. So is this a good application of her view? It seems to me like it was. And by the way, if I misunderstood her view, she's free to correct me now. I asked her, is this, but it stumped her. And she's thinking about it. Is it okay to kill the 2-year-old who is conceived by incest? And she pauses, and finally she says, pardon me for chuckling. She said, I've had mixed feelings about that. I'm thinking, mixed? Okay, at least they're mixed, right? That was a concession of sorts. But now I notice the line is growing behind me. All right? And I am interfering now with her work product. And I realize my opportunity as an ambassador for Christ has come to an end. Now, can you imagine if I was of a different frame of mind? I hadn't gotten to the gospel yet, right? Sorry, folks, I haven't got to the gospel. Sit down and shut up. Maybe you'll learn something. Where were we? But see, I didn't feel like I had to artificially force the gospel into this conversation where it didn't belong. I was following the circumstances that God provided for me at the moment. Why'd you talk about abortion? Why did you choose that? People ask me. I didn't choose it. It's where it went. So that you know how to respond to each person. It had a life of its own. So I'm doing what I can with what was given to me. And then I realize I'm at the end of it, and I leave it. And I move on. I pray for her, but I entrust her to God. She was my task at that moment for as long as I had, but she's God's problem, in a sense. God's the one who's ultimately responsible for her. Now, I want you to notice something in that conversation. I used about 6 or 7 different questions. I used a question to open up the conversation. I asked her about her jewelry. I used questions to gather more information about her view. I even used questions to maybe offer or point out a weakness or a flaw in her view. That's when I trotted out the toddler kind of thing. And in my notes at this point, it says, and she was doing most of the work. That's what my notes used to say. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, if she's doing most of the work, that means I'm doing some of the work, but I wasn't doing some of the work. I was doing none of the work. It was easy. I was relaxed. There was no fight. So I put in my notes, she was doing all of the work. Then I realized, well, she wasn't working either. There wasn't no lines drawn in the sand. There was no, we weren't defending turf. We weren't having a fight or anything like that. This was relaxed. This was easy. It was a conversation. And that's the way I want it. I do not want to get in fights with people. Fighting with people does not help anything. I got a basic rule about this. If you're taking notes, you can write this down. If I get mad, or if you get mad when you're talking with other people, if I get mad, I lose. Right? Who wants to be persuaded by somebody who's angry at them? Well, what if I don't get mad, but they get mad? All right, write this down. If they get mad, I lose. Right? If anybody gets mad, I'm going to lose. Write that one down. That's even better. You're thinking, why didn't you just say that first? If anybody gets mad, I lose. By the way, this is a good principle for marriage. A lot harder. Too many married people here, nobody laughed. Right? They're like, yeah, it hurts. Harder to apply in marriage. Anybody gets mad, you lose, right? Okay. But in this situation, I don't want to fight with people. I want to have an amicable conversation, and in the process, give them something to think about, which is what I call putting a stone in their shoe. All right? Now, I have a way of doing that, though. I have a tool to maneuver, all right? And it's called the tactical game plan. Now, we have lots of tactics, and you can find it in the book. I think that this might be the only one that's left. I had my buddy here grab it from the table so I could use it as a prop. You may have to go on to Amazon to get it. It's called Tactics, a Game Plan for Discussing Your Christian Convictions, okay? And there's a lot of tactics in there. They have names like Taking the Roof Off and Just the Facts, Ma'am, and Road Scholar, and What a Friend We Have in Jesus, and all kind Inside Out. These are all maneuvers you can use in conversation to help make your point more persuasive and more clear. But there is one tactic that is, I call it the queen mother of all tactics. It is a tactic that is the easiest thing to employ to stop a challenger in their tracks, to turn the tables, and to get the other person thinking and put you in the driver's seat of the conversation, because that's where you want to be. You want to be in the driver's seat of the conversation, all right? Doesn't mean you're doing all the talking. You're actually not doing most of the talking. The other person is, because of the way the tactic works. And this tactic has a name, and the name of this tactic, which is the basis for the game plan, the name of the tactic is colombo. And I get different responses when I say that word from different audiences. The younger audiences are going, huh? Like this. Older crowd, they get it. We had a mixed crowd here. So how many who know who Lieutenant Colombo is? Oh, good. You've got a culturally elite enterprise, a group of people here. They get it, all right? Now, if you don't know, he's a detective. This last year was the 50-year anniversary of Colombo, all right? So he's been around for a long time. You can still get him on YouTube or whatever, but he shows up at the crime scene. He's wearing this old trench coat. Looks like he slept in it, Maybe he did. I got mine at the Salvation Army. My wife said, whenever you buy something at Salvation Army, you always want to check the pockets because you never know what you're going to find. Wait, what's this? Oh my gosh, look at that. Colombo has a cigar, right? Now this is just plastic, so no worries about that. It's I actually don't like cigars. Any time I get a real cigar, I always destroy it by fire. All the way down, I don't want anybody to stumble, right? Okay, so he's got a cigar. He's also got a pad of paper, but he can't use his pad of paper. Why not? He doesn't have a pen or pencil. He's got to bum it off of somebody. I mean, this guy's walking around scratching his head. He doesn't look like he's thinking his way out of a wet paper bag. I mean, he's stupid. But he's stupid like a fox because he's got a plan. And at some point, he'll put his finger to his brow like he's deep in painful thought. And then he'll say something like this. I don't know. There's something about this thing that bothers me. Do you mind if I ask you a question? Then he asks a question, right? Gets an answer back. God, thank you. You're very intelligent. One more thing. And then he one more things him to death, right? Question after question, and pretty soon people get upset. I'm sorry. It's because I'm asking all these questions, but I can't help it. It's a habit. And this is a habit you need to get into. The key to the Colombo tactic and the game plan is the Christian goes on the offensive in an inoffensive way with carefully selected questions that advance the conversation. I'll say it again. The key to the tactic is that the Christian goes on the offensive in an inoffensive way with carefully selected questions that move the conversation forward, okay? Now, the game plan has 3 steps to it, basically, 3 parts to it. I'm only going to give you 2 because if I give you a third one, you wouldn't buy the book. Plus, I don't have time to do them all. I can barely have time just to give you a thumbnail sketch of the first 2 moves, but it'll be enough to fulfill my promise to you because this is easy to do for anybody. You're going to be on the shallow end of the pool with this. It's not hard. We're going to use questions because questions are polite, right? We're showing an interest in other people when we use questions. When we draw them out, we're getting information from them and may be helpful to us, just like when I was talking to the witch in Wisconsin. I'm listening, okay? And it's giving me a hint of maybe which direction I might go with more questions, all right? So they're pleasant. They keep you in the driver's seat of the conversation. These are all pluses for questions. And you're not doing the talking for the most part. The other folks are doing the talking. You're just listening, but they are moving in the direction that your questions send them, okay? So I want to give you the first 2 steps of the game plan. And when I say the first step of the game plan here, I do not want you thinking about anything further when you're engaging somebody that in a way that might lead to spiritual things. I don't want you thinking, well, when will I get to the gospel? Maybe they'll become a Christian. Yeah, I don't want you thinking about down the line. That's just a distraction. That may keep you from saying anything. All I want you to do is one thing. Commit yourself to doing one thing at first. Very simple. All you're going to do is gather information. That's the first step. Gather information. You're going to gather information. Now, in both of these steps, these 2 steps, I'm going to give you a model question that you could use, okay? But the point is that you're going to try to understand something about the other person, maybe general stuff if you just met them, but if you're in a spiritual conversation, you want to understand something about their views, especially if they offer a challenge to Christianity. And that model question for the first step where you're just gathering information, you're not committed to a long conversation yet, you don't know what's going to happen. You're just seeing whether there's an opportunity, all right? You're not committed to anything. That's why it's easy to do this first step. The first model question is, what do you mean by that? Something like that. It's very, very general. So I go to see the witch in Wisconsin, she's got a pentagram. I say, what do you mean by that? Does that jewelry have religious significance, for example? Now, I use this kind of question in variations all the time, even with Christians who raise issues, okay? Somebody asked me a question at the end of the last session because I made a case for the existence of God based on the origin of the universe, okay? And he said, well, what do I do when people say, where did God come from? Or who created God? Now, this is a question that you hear a lot from people. And I asked him, now this is a point of clarification. What are you assuming, or the person who asked the question, what is that person assuming when they ask you who created God or what caused God? You're assuming that God was caused, that God was created, and then you're asking who did it, all right? But nobody believes in God believes that God was created, okay? So that's where that issue goes south, is because that's not our view. We're not saying everything had a cause. We said the universe had a cause, but not necessarily God. But notice how I opened up by asking a point of clarification. What are you assuming? Well, God had a cause. Well, why would you assume that? Christians don't believe that God was caused or that he came into being, okay? But notice I'm just getting a little bit more information there, asking for more clarification. And there's lots of different ways that this can be used, okay? Especially if people are raising challenges. Somebody says, well, everything's relative, so they're trying to dismiss Christianity. Oh, it's all relative. Oh, okay. What do you mean by relative? What do you mean by that? Explain that to me. Now, I wrote a book on relativism, so I know what relativism is. By the way, the book's title is Relativism. Easy to remember. But that doesn't mean the person who's saying everything is relative knows what relativism is. Oftentimes, they're just repeating a slogan. And so what I want to know is, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. Okay? Now, notice when people make challenges against Christianity and you ask them to tell you more, the tendency is you don't want to hear that. Right? It's already hard enough to hear the first objection. Don't tell me more. But I'm telling you, this will be an advantage. You're not committed to answer them yet. You're just trying to figure out what their concerns are. all right? You may not be able to answer. That's all right. Let them talk. Because when you ask them, what do you mean by that in some variation, a lot of times you're going to get, well, 60s alert here, just saying, okay? You're going to get a Simon and Garfunkel response. Remember those guys? Who remembers those guys? Like I do. Oh, wow, lots of people do. Okay. In 1966, they wrote a song called The Sounds of Silence, right, and that's what you're going to get. You ask a question, what do you mean by that? You get Simon and Garfunkel, The Sounds of Silence, right? Why? Because they don't know what, I mean, I'm not putting people down, but I'm just saying this is my experience. They don't know what they mean by that. They have not thought about it. This is true for Christians too, so we're not exempt. But be prepared when you start asking for more information, and people are going to not be able to give you more, okay? And what this causes them to do is to think more regarding their own view. And this could be deadly to their view. And I don't have time for this. I told a story yesterday about Seattle, a waitress in Seattle, where I wasn't even trying to share Christ. I didn't want to share. I was too early in the morning. Stay away. I'm not talking about, I don't believe in God. Get away from me. Yet it turned out she kept saying these things that were so odd that I kept asking her what she meant. And she ended up saying, no, it was spiritual. She ended up saying, nobody's ever asked me questions about my view before. And it got me thinking, is what she said. So here I am not even trying, right? But I'm asking, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? And it forces her to think about what she does mean about those things, okay? So this is the first step. It just gather more information. You don't know what you're going to do with the information. You just need to get it, then you can decide. Maybe you can go further. If they tell you more about their view, and then you may have more ambiguities and you ask more questions about that. Somebody says, well, I'm an atheist. Oh, really? What kind of atheist are you? There are different versions of atheism. What do you mean, an atheist? I don't believe in God. You mean you don't believe in a guy with a gray beard who's up on a throne in this cloud somewhere? Is that the God you don't believe in? Or maybe you don't believe in anything that's spiritual. Maybe you only believe in, empirical things matter and emotion. I'm not sure what your view is. So help me to understand it, okay? Because if their view is that nothing exists but matter, it's only molecules, most atheists are like that, materialists they're called, you can't raise the problem of evil against Christianity. Why? Because there can't be any evil in the world if all we have is molecules clashing into molecules. The concept of good and bad are not material stuff. If there is morality, it's got to be above the material stuff. And therefore, if all you believe in is material stuff, then there can't be good and bad, there can't be evil in the world. Okay, now, probably for a lot of you, that you went way too fast for me, okay? But if it went over your head, it maybe hit the person behind you. I'm just saying there are consequences to worldviews. They're packages. I don't have time to go into those details, but I do talk about it in some of our books, and it's called The Moral Argument for the Existence of God. Turns out that the problem of evil is not one good argument against God. It's a great argument for God. It's a great argument against atheism. I do talk about that in The Story of Reality, which is another book there. But the point I'm making is I want to use my questions to figure out exactly where that person is at. And in the process, it maybe give me a chance to go a step further, and that's step 2. So the first step is just to gather information. Is that easy to do? Can you guys do that? You're not committed to anything, just gather information, ask questions, especially some form of the question, what do you mean by that? Here's the second question. Now we know what a person believes. Next, we want to know why they believe it. I call this reversing the burden of proof, but it simply means if a person says something is so, there is no God, for example, or Jesus never existed, or the Bible's been changed, or evolution is true, pick your poison, whatever it is. If they say it's so, it is their job to give reasons in favor of their view. It is not our job to try to refute their view. Let me say that again. It is their job to give reasons in favor of their view. It is not our job first to refute their view. And a lot of times people want to just throw things out, and this is their view, and then they're waiting for us to try to show them they're wrong. That's backwards. If we try to do that, we're giving them a free ride. So in the immortal word, 60s alert. In the immortal words of Ricky Ricardo, they got a lot of explaining to do. Right? So we want them to give the reasons for their own view. Maybe they've got some. Maybe they don't. But if you don't ask, you won't know. And if they do have some, they think they do, then now you know what the reasons are and you've got something to deal with. Okay? And by the way, when you ask the question, and here's your second model question, how did you come to that conclusion? Or what are your reasons for that, some version of that question? Don't be surprised if you get Simon and Garfunkel again, because your question assumes that they have reasons for their view, that they've thought it through, and a lot of people don't. And this includes Christians as well. So I'm not beating up on any particular group. I'm just saying this is the way people operate lots of times. They socialize to believe what they believe. They haven't really thought through their ideas. But what this game plan allows you to do is it allows you to maneuver with safety. As a Christian in a conversation, safety, yeah, you're in the shallow end of the pool. You're ankle deep. You're not saying anything about God. You're not giving your own view yet. Well, if I'm not giving my own view, then how am I going to make progress? Trust me on this. You will be absolutely amazed if you get in the habit of just using these two questions the way God is going to use it. I get people tell me this all the time. The biggest thing that I hear about this book, and it's a little embarrassing even to say it, but it's the most common thing I hear, is that this book changed my life. Now, that's flattering to me, and it's humbling, because that's what you're supposed to say about the Bible. But I'm not surprised in a way, because these concepts changed my life too. And when I began to focus on gardening and using a gardening tool like asking questions, I began to make more progress than I ever had before, because I wasn't getting in fights with people. I used to be spreading a whole lot more heat than light. You know what that's like, right? This is not productive. But as I took on the task of gardening and tried to do a little here, a little there, try to put a stone in people's shoes and not try to get people to sign on the dotted line, that's when my conversations got more productive. And of course, it's easier when I realized that this is the New Testament method. This is the New Testament method. There it is. Gardening, 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 gardening. So what I'm saying here is you don't need to swing for the fences. You don't even need to get on base, in my view. All you need to do is get into the batter's box. That's it. And this small little tactical game plan that I've introduced you to will allow you to do that, okay? So let me close with this thought. First, an observation. I've already fulfilled my promise. I have given you a game plan that will allow you to converse with confidence in any situation, et cetera, et cetera. 2 questions. What do you mean by that? How'd you come to that conclusion? Easy. Really easy, okay? So, my final thought. If you don't remember anything else from our time together, remember this. You find yourself in a tough spot, in an interactive evangelism, witnessing circumstance, take a tip from Lieutenant Colombo. Always ask questions. Let's pray. Lord, it's been a really magnificent weekend. Great people here, great staff, great conference. We appreciate all that you've done and the lives that were changed here. I pray specifically for this group here with this message. I realize I had to move really quickly, give some basics. I pray, Father, that even these basics will find a root in their hearts, in their minds, and they begin to use these simple questions to begin to maneuver more effectively in conversation with those people they care about. I pray that you would bear fruit through this moment, this morning, and tonight with Megan, that you would bear fruit that remains for the kingdom's sake. Amen.
Amen. In light of